Hey everyone, this is Jack Smith. Welcome to IT Horror Stories podcast. Good to have you back as always. Welcome. And this month, Bob is back.
Hey everyone.
Hey Bob. Bob, you came to me, you wanted to talk about something.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I wanted to talk about the bane of my existence, and honestly, I think the bane of the existence of a lot of IT people, and that's the dreaded topic of shadow IT.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
I was bane of your existence. I was going to reply something else, but shadow IT, I hear you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Shadow IT. For those who aren't really familiar with the term, first of all, praise yourself lucky. You don't know how good you have it.
True. Can confirm.
Exactly. And what is shadow IT? Shadow IT is essentially business doing IT stuff without the knowledge of the IT department. And yeah, I know that a lot of you are currently screaming. I hear you. I feel you. I would be screaming as well, but yeah, that's not really an all that interesting episode. So I'm going to tell you a few stories of the more how do I best put this, the ones that stuck with me. Let us say it like that.
The ones that deserve to be retold for future generations.
Yes, as a warning.
Shadow IT is always... There is not a single Shadow IT story that ends well.
That's true. Yes.
And you mentioned when business does IT, but imagine that it's your local IT department doing their local IT in the global environment. So when IT does shadow IT, it gets worse. But this is your story first, and I'll pick in.
Yeah, indeed. And I think IT doing shadow IT, that's an all different episode.
True.
Let's first stick with business does IT. So
yeah, that's fun enough.
I'm going to set the scene. We are, I think, around 10 years ago at a major multinational company, global company, very well known, and I'm going to leave it at that. And essentially, it was just an average day. I was managing the IT department. As per usual, I was managing the application side of things. And suddenly, I get a call of the CEO. Never a good thing if you get a call of CEO out of the blue. And essentially, he started shouting and yelling at me because that was who he was. He liked to shout and yell. That apparently the sales department couldn't do their job.
Oh no.
It was our fault.
Well, there's a power plug attached to it. Of course it's your fault.
First I imagined it was something like that.
Yeah.
And I wished it would have been something like that. No. My first reaction was, okay, why can't sales sell? Because honestly, they need to talk to customers and do their thing. So what was he talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he was talking about the sales reports. So the sales reports, the projections, the revenue streams, all the sales funnels, all of that shit. That it didn't work anymore. That was my fault. So went over there, spoke with the VP of sales, asked him to show me what they were talking about. And I was glad that I did. Because being a large multinational company, of course, everybody expects that you use the software solutions that are enforced by the head office.
Mm-hmm.
And they did use those, but only the bare minimum. Because apparently what they did was they had, over the course of the years, some technical people working in the sales department who were quite prolific in Access and Excel.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
That is, I sense a lot of job security for the people having to fix this.
Those people who initially set it up were long gone.
Yes, the moment you said somebody started doing this in Excel and Access, maintenance is not an issue because it doesn't exist.
Yes, indeed. They were long gone and they were used by the entire sales department, which was around 50 people. So quite a big department fiddling around in those. My initial thought was, okay, let's figure out what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Logically, indeed. I asked him to show me and he pointed me to a network share where there were various files, or where there should have been various files, but the files weren't there anymore. So, oops, indeed. But at the same time, network share, what's the biggie? Everything is backed up.
To quote yourself, I hear a but coming.
Yes, there is a big but that's just over the horizon. When I went to the network team and I said, hey guys, can you please restore whatever is on a particular network share? They asked me what network share. They were not aware of a specific network share. And indeed, on the storage system, that particular network share did not exist. So that was problem one. Where the hell was that network share? Where was it coming from? Where was it living? After, I think, 2 days, we figured out that that network share was essentially a local server they bought, and they had running somewhere in a closet in their office, which was patched into the regular desk office network. So as far as we were concerned, it was just a regular desktop, or it was plugged into a desktop network outlet. We weren't aware of that particular server. Apparently a server that was running already for 8 years without any software updates, without any security, without any OS updates. It was just installed there and left alone.
I have to ask, was it server hardware or did they just scavenge a desktop from somewhere?
No, it was an actual server hardware. And since it was sales that bought it on the sales budget, at the time it was the most over-the-top powered machine possible. It cost, at the time that they bought it cost several million.
Of course, because salespeople to salespeople will sell what salespeople want to sell.
Exactly. And they needed a lot of storage. And essentially there was a lot of storage on there. We discovered that the machine had around 4 terabytes of storage.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Wow.
As I said, it was an expensive, an expensive beast.
That's impressive.
Yes, indeed. Very impressive.
Can I do a nerd question?
Yes.
Were these 15K RPM fiber channel discs?
I never opened the machine.
because that would explain the million euro price tag.
Honestly, there's a high likelihood, but
exactly.
But I refuse to open the machine.
Yeah, because the second you touch it, you're responsible for it.
Exactly.
You don't even want to open the cabinet it's in. You had to.
I had to, but I did not open the physical machine, and I just, once I discovered that, I prayed to God that the machine was still running. Mm-hmm. Luckily, it was running.
Okay.
However, it ran out of disk space.
I have many questions, but I'm not going to ask him right now.
It ran out of disk space, so the machine blue screened, and it couldn't boot up anymore.
Okay, yep, I see multiple operating system reasons for this happening.
Yes. And since it didn't boot up anymore, it wasn't available on the network anymore, and they could no longer access all the files.
And the share was therefore...
And the share was indeed exposed to the sales guys in their own local, what's it called again, like VLAN. It was set up. It was relatively decently set up at the time, but I still don't know how those guys managed to have the necessary rights to do the setup.
That was my question, and I was going to ask you, shall I keep my security stuff for later, or do I throw it in now? Because I have multiple questions here.
You can throw it in now.
So was it a domain member?
No.
Okay, and then they either had one generic user, or they used password pass-through and had to change their domain password on the thing every now and then.
Essentially, it used the same password. It used the login of the VP.
Oh, I am now scanning my brain for VPs being fired by Catapult.
We choose not to have any subscription model nor sponsoring in order to keep our stories accessible for each and everyone. To support us, please check our merchandise at shop.ithorrorstories.eu or buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com/ithorrorstories.
You wish, but no. Apparently the CEO is completely aware and fine with it. because because it gave them the flexibility to do what head office didn't allow them to
And
do.
of course, then, as long as you had the sales figures, it was all good.
Exactly.
Okay, please continue.
So yeah, essentially, we got it cleaned up. We removed the old data because apparently they used it to store every little document, everything you can imagine. They stored on there.
Okay, so you got it back up again.
Yes, we got it back up again. But then it was the next question: what do we do with it?
Yeah, because you have now officially made a discovery that
Is a huge liability for so many reasons.
Yes, this is, you don't even know where to start.
Exactly. Officially, I had to inform head office of the situation.
Yes.
Head office would just say, power it down, period.
That is, anyone with at least one active brain cell in security would say, switch it off and
forget about it.
Yeah.
Yes. So those were my responsibilities on one hand. On the other hand, of course, we have the CEO. The local CEO and VP and the entire sales team say, yeah, we absolutely need this because the data is not available in the system of the head office, and the reports that we get from there aren't tailor-made to exactly look and feel how we want them to be. So that's
fair enough.
That's essentially between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
And then you have the CIO.
Because of, yes.
Indeed.
Oh dear.
Oh dear, indeed. Essentially, the CIO, he was not aware of the situation. So
that's an interesting board meeting where you want to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah. But he wasn't aware of the situation. But yeah, he was even in a worse place than me because he was locally responsible for security and risk. Mm-hmm. He also needed to report the CEO. Mm-hmm. So what essentially we landed on was that we would have a migration project from all the data that's on there to migrate it into the system of head office. And then at the same time, the CIO and the CEO lobbied head office to have reports that looked more like the ones that they were using locally, which was a very back office, backroom politics happened because company was German and you know how they can be sticklers for rules. So
yes.
Essentially, we had to have very senior German directors agree on the fact that we did not immediately power down those machines. Mm-hmm. We migrated all the data into the data of the platform of the head office. And on top of that the existing reports needed to be rebuilt. Essentially, all of that happened over the course of around 12 months. So quite successfully, quite happy, until, because the story doesn't end there, until I suddenly get, I think we were 9 months in that migration, I get a call from the VP of sales. Hey, we have an issue with one of the new reports. Okay, fine, but we don't do those. Those are done by head office. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they don't want to help us with these reports.
There's going to be a reason for that, I feel it coming.
Yes. So essentially, what they had been doing ever since we started to migrate the data into the corporate system was dumping that data into a Power BI data lake, and there they started creating new reports again.
So they basically made a copy of what was provided and then worked on the copy.
Yes, essentially.
Okay.
And yeah...
Sorry to jump in. Do I want to know where that server was running?
Well, that was running on the corporate network in corporate cloud.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. So all of those things were good. Let us say people from compliance and audit were not aware about the fact that commercial data was now living in a much more publicly available or in a much more publicly available data space.
Yep.
But yeah, they just said, okay, we go from Access and Excel, we go to Power BI, and we just keep on doing what we were doing. That was their plan until the moment that they noticed that they did not have sufficient Power BI knowledge to rebuild the reports, because they started building reports because corporate said for quite a big bunch of their reports, there's no need to have those reports. You have an existing report where you can activate a filter and you have exactly what you need. But no, they prefer to have 50 different reports, each for one client, instead of one report where you then just selected a client. That was too much of a bother.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I see what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I also see why head office would think otherwise.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, then they came to us about Power BI thing. I just clear said we don't do Power BI, period. And when I left that company, they were recruiting a Power BI specialist that would be living in the sales department specifically for that. And in parallel, they were trying to fight off the audit and compliance department of head office that were informed about the fact that the data was
They will get to it, because once you get to the corporate systems, you will have some kind of audit running over it, and then it will pop up with a thing. And on that thing, I have a question, that how could that system remain undetected for so long, even in user network? Of course, it's 10 years ago. You wouldn't be as proactive security-wise as you are today.
Exactly.
But today, your average generic network sweep will find a device that's not in your domain in the user network, and then pick that up, hopefully.
Hopefully, indeed.
Plus, if you do network authentication, any device not in the domain cannot get onto the network.
Yeah. So I assume that in this day and age it would be significantly more difficult, but at the same time, this was not set up without the compliance of somebody from IT. Let's be honest. It couldn't have been set up, especially with patching and the fact that it was in a closet and all those things. It was professionally installed.
Yeah, somebody knew.
Somebody knew at one time. And honestly, I think that's the biggest thing here. Somebody knew, somebody did not inform the right people, or the right people were informed and they did not inform their successors afterwards.
Yeah.
But business, essentially, they thought they were doing everything above the board.
Yeah, but I can see it happen that local IT said, okay, they have a thing here and we will do it properly. We will put it away. We'll do some basic setup, yada, yada.
Yeah, and they do the things to avoid being detected by corporate because, let's be honest, a local CEO still has the power to fire you even if you say no for the right reasons.
That's always a thing. And then, so on that CEO, was that country level or regional level?
That was country level.
Country level, okay. So not that super high up in the food chain, but locally some mandate.
Yeah, essentially, locally, he could decide everything as long as in theory, it was aligned to the corporate rules.
The corporate guys, so. Yeah. But yeah, it's that's something that hopefully today would not be as obvious, certainly not in larger corps where they have woken up on their cybersecurity level, that most of them should do internal sweeps and internal scans and network authentication. But I can imagine that 10 years ago, this was not as much the case. So, yeah, and...
Yeah, but at the same time, as if sufficient people are complicit in the story, it can happen even in this day and age. Yes, there's sufficient tooling where it can be detected, but yeah, if you do the right things, it's still not all that obvious.
No, that is, you will need a bit more accomplices, but when you do play the local versus regional versus global card, you will find a lot of folks that say, yeah, okay, but we need this locally and we're not getting it from higher up, so we will do it ourselves. That is a very common reflex to have, actually.
Yeah, and origin stories of any shadow IT that is created is exactly because of that. Somebody has a specific need, and the need is not fulfilled by the rest of the organization. So they're going to try and find a solution.
Yeah, that on its own is good because you want to move ahead in whatever you need to do and what you're doing. But yeah, then in the end, it's the non-existence of the run phase. It was set up once, and they basically for all these years forgot about it because that network share was always there, and
It worked.
from what I understood is that there was no data loss because once you added some disks to the container or the RAID array, the thing booted up again and everything came back online. So they were extremely lucky that there was no data loss there.
Yeah. Honestly, what I just did was just cleared out the temp files.
Okay, yeah, so you boot into maintenance mode, you free up some space.
Yes.
And I can imagine from 10 years you will have some megabytes of temp space available that the page file can extend again.
Exactly. And then I told them, okay, now you have to clean up everything that you no longer legally need, just purge it.
Yeah. So would it be, because it's basically a file share,
Yeah.
was it suggested as a workaround, okay, you have your own system here on your own little hidden file server, that you actually move it to a corporate file server and then you start using it there and then you work out the politics with Herr Doctor in Germany later because it's a German company. Was that considered or an option, or was it just too far-fetched for my brain?
No, it was asked. But essentially, then the way the file shares were set up was that you had your local personal network share.
Yeah.
And then essentially you only had a file share used for transfer, for data transfer.
Okay.
You did not any shared data was more stored on SharePoint and stuff like that. And yeah, SharePoint didn't allow for the amount of file sizes that they were using, and the transfer was purged on a weekly basis.
I do get it. It is the same moral penalty of using Excel as a database as it is to use SharePoint as a file server.
This podcast features Jack Smith and guests. We say thank you to our demo scene friends who helped making this podcast possible. Commander Homer for editing, Danko for music and audio advice, NetPoet for additional voiceovers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even so, the file size were just too big for SharePoint at the time. That was set up in that SharePoint environment was 50 megabytes.
Not a single report I know is under that.
Exactly.
I do understand their, I wouldn't call it business reason, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, but essentially their business reason was that they did not like the new system.
Yeah.
Because if I then asked back, it coincided with the rollout of the new sales system that corporate rolled out.
And they said, we're not doing this.
Exactly. They said, we are not doing this. We are just entering the basic minimum, so corporate is happy. And we will just keep on using our Excels and Access files that we have. And then, and since they were no longer allowed to do it on a network share like they did before.
And then they put their own little box in.
Exactly. They just saw a problem and they solved it from their perspective with all the risks and everything attached to it.
And everybody just forgot about it because it was just there.
Yeah, exactly.
Specifically, if you like thinking that, well, if when the CEO said, no, it's running there, there's no technical background left, suddenly it dies.
Yeah.
And then it becomes your problem, like what share, what server. I think they were extremely lucky that it was just running out of disk space and not one of the disk containers dying and they effectively having lost all their data. Because then I don't think corporate would have let this one slide.
No. Honestly, I wouldn't really say that corporates wouldn't have let it slide, the fact that that happened. Because from corporate perspective, all sales data that needed to be there was there.
Indeed. And sales were going all good.
And sales was going all good. I think the only issue corporates would have had with that particular situation was that if there would have been a drop in sales.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as sales would have just delivered and hit their targets, they couldn't care less that the additional data that corporate didn't really was interested in, that was lost. But this was mainly the entire local sales organization was organized to use all that specific data to give reports to clients and do client health analysis and all of those things. Those were based on that additional local data.
Yeah. And then you turn out surprised how IT gets frustrated if the entire system is basically working against their own policies.
Yeah.
And everybody is happy as long as nothing goes wrong. And when things go wrong, it's IT's fault.
Yes.
That's a wonderful summary.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, this is not a rare thing. Yeah? Folks, let's be honest. This is a common story.
Yep.
There are plenty of you guys around, and I'm sure that know of a desktop sitting on their desk or a laptop somewhere in a desk that is running a daily job, or that is running a file share or a web server or whatnot, because somebody at one time decided that was the most convenient way forward and that they would get around to doing it properly later on.
You get expensive oopsies.
Yes. Expensive oopsies with consequences that can cost you dearly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe I'll just end on that.
Sure.
There's one small anecdote about Shadow IT by business that I want to share with each and every one of you. And I was working in a company and we just had a change of senior management.
Okay.
So the entire board was replaced for commercial reasons.
Reasons are reasons.
Voilà, reasons are reasons. And the director at that particular time made a very strong statement. He said, in my previous company, we suffered tremendously from Shadow IT. So I vouch here that I will no longer tolerate any Shadow IT being done.
Okay.
In between now and the next 3 years, all Shadow IT will be thrown out the window and will be replaced by properly maintained systems.
Okay, good.
Great. We were very happy.
Yeah, as an IT department, yes.
Until the next part of his speech came. The next part of his speech, I don't remember it word for word anymore. It's been too long. But he essentially said, because somebody asked, and what about the needs that Shadow IT helps fulfill?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, of course, those needs remain. So we will empower all business users to develop their own little programs and scripts in order to fulfill those needs. And those will be supported by IT.
This is intentional silence from my end now.
Yeah.
It's like, alrighty then.
Yes. Yes.
Oh dear.
So I think that's one other thing you should also be concerned about. Shadow IT is not always recognized as Shadow IT, but also sometimes it's known under user empowerment.
Absolutely. Good. Good. Bob, let's round off here. This was very, very insightful, I think, from every possible end. Thanks everyone again for tuning in, as always. You can find our previous episodes on ithorrorstories.eu. You can find us where you find your podcasts, that is on Apple Music, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Deezer, and wherever you find your panic attacks. Reach out to us, hello@ithorrorstories.eu. Check our merchandise. It helps paying for all the costs we do here with the podcast. Otherwise, we are just in it for the likes and the subscribes and your comments. So if you like this episode, please give us a little thumbs up or a heart. Any merch is shop.ithorrorstories.eu. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time. Any last words, Bob, from your end?
Yeah, pretty much the same as you. Thanks for listening, everyone. And yeah, I'm not going to do the like and subscribe.
Come on.
YouTube thing, but if you think that somebody else in your acquaintances might like these stories, don't forget to share. That's highly appreciated.
That's a good one. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
The content of this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only and is meant to humorously explore various tech-related situations. Any resemblance to actual events or real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. We ridicule situations, never individuals or groups. Listener discretion is advised, and we encourage everyone to approach technology with a sense of humor and an open mind.